But I think we are set, Sprank. So if you would, tell me about your growing up years.
I grew up in Lafayette, Indiana. Spent the first 18 years of my life living in Lafayette. And on the 18th birthday, I signed a professional contract with the Brooklyn Dodgers for a $25,000 bonus, and told my father I'd never have to work again. And of course that proved to be, he said, "I'm sure you will." And he was right, of course. And with the 18 years in Lafayette, then I went off to play baseball 11 years and was fortunate enough to be called up twice, once with the Dodgers and once with Cincinnati Reds. And neither call-up I was able to get into a game, and that's another story. But, you know, I've been very fortunate growing up. My first job out of baseball was working at a bank doing public relations. And I used to go to the president of the bank on payday and say, "Mr. Wirtz, it's payday." And I'd turn my back and hold my hand out. And I told him, I says, "You know, if I'd have known there was a job like this, I'd have quit baseball a long time ago." Because they were paying me to take people to lunch and dinner and ball games and stuff. And then in 1976, in the meantime, I'd had a commercial refrigeration business. And it started with 4 employees and ended up with 21. And I had a cancer operation in 1976. And the doctor says, "You may live a year and you may outlive me." He died a couple of years ago. And I decided to sell the business and start carving full time, because if I was going to live a year or 100 years, I was going to do something that I really loved and enjoyed. And I started carving hunting decoys in 1968. But I think the 11 years that I played professional baseball, no one teaches you how to lose. And when I got involved with carving, it just took me to a degree that I just was going crazy, trying to be the best carver. And then I started teaching, and I taught for 30 years.
Now that we've finished texturing, burning the neck joint onto the body, we're ready to do the little bit of detail that I talked about earlier on the bill. So if you look real closely, I'm going to take this little scoring tool, and I'm just going to make these little ridges.
You know, this is in my workshop, and where I spend many hours. It's not work, it's fun for me. But I start, first of all, I've had a federal permit. Years ago I got a federal permit, so I can have anything in my possession but bald eagle feathers. And what helps me is I do not and will not carve something unless I have a study skin where I can take the measurements and duplicate that on to the wood. Now, if I have the measurements of a life-size spoonbill as an example, I can reduce that pattern to scale by using a printer. So it's really helped, because a lot of homes aren't large enough for the life-size carvings. So what I can do, I take the pattern, this is about 30% life size, and I start with a top view and a side view, and I have all the feather layout of the wings, the top, and this is the bottom. So we start with the patterns, and we cut this out with a bandsaw. A side view and a top view. This is how it all started, just the rough cut with a bandsaw. And then I go from here to all the measurements I have. And this, of course, was reduced to scale. And then I use glass eyes, taxidermy eyes, for the bird itself. My theory has always been, I want to spend more time on the head, because if you're talking to someone, you're looking at their face, not their feet. So for me, I like to have it separate so that I can do the carving in my hand and not have it attached, which makes it a bit more bulkier. You know, I'm often asked, you know, well, how in the world did you start wanting to start carving birds of all things? Well, you know, I grew up in Lafayette. My grandfather came over from Germany, and he was a cabinet maker. So I grew up, you know, in his shop building cabinets and gun cabinets and all that. So I was familiar with wood, but he and I would not have known what a decoy was, a duck decoy. So when I started, and I was also doing some taxidermy work when I was a young boy, and mounting ducks and pheasants. That was the only thing we had in Indiana. And so in 1968, I just got this desire to carve some decoys so that the head positions would be a little bit different. And that led to a competitive thing of lifelike birds. But it all started, I think, with my grandfather and back in the 40s and growing up around wood and never dreaming that someday that would be my passion in life, was to carve wooden birds. Can you imagine making a living carving wooden birds? We moved to Sanibel in 1994, Patty and our son James, and we left the eastern shore of Maryland, where the only thing that I'd ever carved was waterfowl. And when I got down here, I learned rather quickly, here on Sanibel, you don't sell ducks, you sell what people see and relate to. So I had a whole new challenge of learning all the measurements and detail of birds that you see here, which would be ospreys and wading birds and things. And that created a challenge that I think was very good for me. And then I got involved at Ding Darling. And I think being involved at Ding Darling was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me for my profession, my family. It opened up a lot of opportunities, and one, carving a life-size bald eagle for the President of the United States. That would have never happened living on the eastern shore of Maryland. You know, I'm often asked this question, well, how in the world did you have this opportunity to carve a bald eagle for the President of the United States? Well, it was, here it goes back to Ding Darling, being involved there, and I was president of the Friends Group, and Secretary Norton would come to town. I'd be the person that would take her to lunch and her entourage. And she says, I heard you carved a bald eagle for the university, FGCU. I said, yeah. She says, can I see a picture? Can I see it? I said, certainly. So she came over to the studio, and I thought she was kidding me. She says, you know, one of your sculptures of a bald eagle will look great in the White House. And I sort of went, yeah. And so I didn't think any more about it. And a couple of weeks later, she called and said, you know, Jim, if you're interested, I'll pursue this. And I says, well, we've got nothing to lose. So then another couple of weeks, 3 weeks went by, and one of her assistants called and says, there's good news and bad news. I says, well, what's the good news? Oh, they've seen your work at the Waterfowl Festival in Easton, Maryland, and they would love to have one of your sculptures of an eagle. I said, what's bad about that? Well, they can't or won't pay for it. Well, you know, I said, I would be honored to do this. I mean, that's a no-brainer. I would be very honored. So the folks on the island here found out that I was not being paid for this. And the president, when he leaves office, is entitled to take X amount of dollars in gifts, which I did not know. But I found out because they were getting appraisals of the sculpture of the eagle. And I asked kindly, I says, would it be possible to get a copy of one of the appraisals? And they said, oh, certainly. So they sent it. And the people on this island, it was appraised for $70,000. The people on this island raised that money for me. And, you know, that tells me and it tells everybody, this is the type of people that live here on these two islands. You just can't find people like this everywhere. They're so giving of their time and their wealth. It's just unreal. I feel so fortunate to live here and be part of this community. I guess everything I've done, I wanted to do well and be the best. It's just, so I don't know what it'd be like to wake up in the morning and not want to go to work, because I've never had a job that I just couldn't wait to get to. And of course, carving is not a job. It's just I'm fortunate that I have something I love that I can do at age 80.